Good evening, guys, and welcome to the meeting tonight. If we could just please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is in the back. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We would like to thank all of the community members who are in attendance tonight and those viewing the meeting live stream at home. Before we begin, the board would like to take this opportunity to offer a few remarks. I think we all can agree that our last meeting did not end as we would have hoped, and we are thankful to have this opportunity to come together again this evening. While we each may have different perspectives and expectations, one thing we can collectively share is our love for our schools, this community, and the people who reside here, and our neighbors and our friends. Although we currently face challenging times, I encourage all, please do not lose sight of the parts that unify us as one school community. We know that disagreeing in good faith is natural, and that healthy dialogue and civil discourse is beneficial as it allows for us to continue to move forward. But we must continue to do so with respect for others and with an open ear to those who are sharing differing opinions. It is our hope that tonight's forum will provide us the chance to come together and hear from the many voices that make BBP so special. To reiterate what we stated at our last Board of Ed meeting, once the mask regulation is removed, our district will be allowing mask wearing to be optional for all families. As a board and district are all looking forward to that time, as it symbolizes a transition from a pandemic learning environment with mask and social distancing to a post-pandemic environment where mask and social distancing is not needed. If you look around the country, many states have provided a date for when schools will be able to have this option. We are hopeful that this will come to fruition in our state as well, but only time will tell. Tomorrow ends the mask mandate for indoor public places as of now. The mask regulation for schools is set to expire in the coming weeks unless extended further. We are holding this BOE forum in order to allow our community members the opportunity to provide their perspectives to the superintendent and also the Board of Education. In order to keep this meeting organized, we respectfully request that all attendants follow these 4 requirements. We respectfully request that you wear your mask. We respectfully request that you are respectful. This conversation will be limited to the reopening plan. Please state your name when at the podium. Please note you must be from Bayport or Blue Point in order to speak. Again, a reminder, we ask that you please respectfully wear your mask. We also respectfully ask that you limit your statements to 3 minutes, as we want to ensure all participants have an opportunity to speak and to be heard. I will give you an update at 2 minutes and 30 seconds when you're at the podium. The BOE promises to listen to all statements, and at the end, we'll do our best to answer all of your questions. At the end of the meeting, the BOE will have a discussion on your questions and statements provided in order to determine next steps. Just to reiterate that one more time, the BOE will not be responding to statements until the end of the meeting. I would respectfully request everyone to please put on their mask. We would truly appreciate it. Before we open it up for comments, I would respectfully ask Mr. Block, our school attorney, to give us an update on where we stand right now in the New York State. Right. Mr. Block?
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Since this has been a very fluid situation, and since we did meet last week, there have been some legal developments. I just want to bring the board and the community up to speed with respect to that. The mask mandate is a regulation from the Department of Health. It's actually regulation 2.60. That's what it's known as. That's it's referenced in the Department of Health regulations, and that has 2 components to it. There's the masking in indoor public places, and that was set to expire tomorrow. And the governor had indicated today that it will expire tomorrow. But that provision is what requires us to wear masks at a school board meeting, because it's an indoor public place. There's also the second provision pertaining to schools, which also would apply to our situation at a board meeting if students are reasonably expected to be present, and also applies in a situation of instruction in school and in our school buildings and all visitors to our school buildings. That is set to expire on February 21st. There were some remarks the governor made, in recent days that she was most likely going to extend that until after the school winter break, and I saw some news reports today that the outlier date on that is looking at to be like around March 7th, which would be a week after return from winter break, I guess, to assess the condition. So it looks like the light is at the end of the tunnel with respect to the mask mandate starting tomorrow for indoor public places, and then following in a few weeks, it looks like for schools. There's two ways that this mask mandate is going to be eliminated. One is through that process which I just described to you, where there's going to be a repeal of that regulation by the state government, and they alone have the authority to do that. The Board of Education does not have the authority to do that. The second way is through a court of law, and there have been challenges to the constitutionality of this regulation, arguments that the Department of Health exceeded its authority, arguments that there's been violations of procedural process that must be undertaken when you're engaging in rulemaking. There's been several legal cases. The most recent came out of Nassau County Supreme Court, where a judge actually ruled that the Department of Health did exceed its authority and the regulation was unconstitutional. As a result of that ruling, it became mask optional, and that was the day here that where masks were not worn. The state, however, went to the appellate court, which has jurisdiction over the lower court, and asked the appellate court to issue a stay of the lower court's order so that the mask mandate would go back in until the appellate court hears a notice of appeal that the state filed. The court granted that stay. That's why the mask came back on. And so we had mask off one day, mask back on the next day because of the appellate courts granting the stay. Now the parties that brought the initial lawsuit have filed an application with the New York State Court of Appeals. That's the highest court in the state, asking that court to remove the stay that was issued by the appellate division. And if that application is granted, then the stay will be removed and then back mask optional that way. If that is not granted, then the stay would be in place until the appellate division decides the case. It looks like, though, however, for all practical purposes, that the mask mandate may very well expire, before the court actually rules on it. We're going to have to see. But in terms of ruling on the unconstitutionality of that regulation, only the court can do that. This Board of Education does not have the authority to do that. So we have a regulation in place. It's a regulation in place for the entire state of New York, for all the schools in the state of New York. It's just not the Bayport Blue Point School District. In terms of adherence, the State Education Department has made it clear to all the school districts that they're expected to comply with that regulation while it's in effect. And they have stated that there will be penalties if they do not comply. So what the role is of the Board of Education in terms of this, because there's very little maneuverability with respect to taking affirmative action to eliminate the mask mandate, is to advocate that it be removed. And the board has done that. The board has communicated with government officials, has sent letters to the government asking for it to be district optional, for the districts to be able to make their own individual choice. Right now, on the regulation front, before it can be extended, and this is what the governor indicated, that she is going to be extending it just for, it looks like for a very brief period of time, they have to afford the Department of Health a public comment period. And so right now, there's a process where folks, anybody, like you folks can, the Board of Education can, submit public comments to the Department of Health until February 14th. It's till Monday, expressing a position regarding the mask mandate and our position on whether the mask mandate should be continued or not. I think you can find that information online. I can make it available to the Board of Education if they want to post something. But there is a specific address, contact person from the Department of Health who is receiving these public comments, which will be considered by the Department of Health when making decisions as to whether or not to extend that mandate. So that's something that certainly is available for everybody to avail themselves of. So I just want to state that that's where it's currently at with respect to the state of New York. This, again, looks like this mandate is going to be expiring on its own right, and it's also subject to being ruled upon by the highest court in the state of New York. Either one of those two events, will most likely lead to the elimination of the mask mandate potentially.
Thank you, Mr. Block. At this time, we will open it up to public comments. I would just remind you to please keep it to 3 minutes, and I will remind you at 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So if you just want to raise your hand, we will go one at a time. Who would like to go first? Yep. You should just come to the podium. If you can just state your name. Please remember, you must be from Bayport or you must be from Blue Point.
My name is Vicki Robinson. Does my time start now?
Yep. Hey, Ms. Robinson, how are you?
During the first week of this year, January 1st to 7th, the 10 states with the most COVID cases per capita were in order: Rhode Island, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Delaware, Florida, Connecticut, Illinois, Hawaii, Maryland. 9 had mask mandates for schools. On the flip side, of the 10 states with the fewest COVID cases per capita, 8 of those states do not have mask mandates. Masks do not stop the spread of COVID-19. According to the CDC, children are among the lowest percentage of spread risk, despite the fact that numerous studies prove that mask wearing breeds bacteria, respiratory complications, social and educational delays, regression, fear, and anxiety. Our district's administrators and board members have done nothing to fight for our children's God-given right to breathe freely. Parents are fed up. Our children are suffering. Nosebleeds, rashes, skin breakouts, panic attacks. The list goes on and on. Kids are afraid to go to school unmasked because they are afraid to show their faces. Let me say that again. Kids are afraid to go to school unmasked because they're afraid to show their faces. I personally have been fighting for 2 years to unmask our kids. I've asked you, I've pleaded with you to hear me and parents like me who want the right to decide what is best for our children. Despite the endless requests and supported medical and psychological documentation you have received from several concerned parents, BBP administration and Board of Education have ignored our pleas for the option to unmask our own children, our own children. You have chosen to disrespect and not support our parental rights. I am my child's parent, not you. I know what is best for my child, not you. But here we are, 17 months, 510 days since school reopened in September of 2020, when BBP decided to mask our children. But 15 days to curb the spread, right? Guidelines are simply guidelines. The mask mandate is not law. It never was. There are multiple superintendents and Board of Educations, not only across New York, but across the country, that have listened to parents. They have fought to protect parental rights. They have written letters to the governor, joined in amicus briefs, held emergency board meetings to discuss the issues at hand. Where were our emergency meetings? Where were our letters of support? On Tuesday, January 25th, when I told my 7-year-old daughter she didn't have to wear a mask to school,
We're at 2:30.
she literally jumped up and down with excitement. She screamed, "Yay, I can look at my friends and see their faces." Tuesday was the first day that her and thousands of New York kids didn't have to wear a mask to school. It was joyful. The kids hugged each other. They played, which they do all the time, by the way. play dates, after school, playgrounds, and have been doing all through the pandemic. But then they have to put on masks to walk into school where they're socially distanced? Think about that. How ludicrous is that? Has common sense completely gone by the wayside? Over the years, I've sent you hundreds of studies, links, medical supported evidence that prove masks don't work. If they did, there wouldn't be kids and teachers contracting COVID, and everybody would be in school all the time. But everybody's going to get it eventually because it's a virus. But it doesn't matter what information I or any other parent send you, it's the same line. BBP follows CDC guidelines. BBP follows the DOH. Are you tired of this? Isn't it time to stand up and support the multiple parents in our community that want the right to do what's best for our children? These masks are damaging our children. If parents want to mask their kids, let them, but leave mine alone. On Tuesday the 25th, I picked up my son from the middle school, and he said, "Mom, today was great. I smiled walking into all my classes. Even some teachers weren't wearing masks. Everyone was so happy." That was the best day he's had in 2 years. About 80 to 90% of students weren't wearing masks in JWY that day. As for Sylvan, when the kids ran out of school, almost 100% of them were maskless. They were smiling. They were happy. I have one more sentence.
Bring your comments to the end.
I have
Thank
one
you.
more sentence. Doesn't that show, they were smiling and happy. Doesn't that show you right there that the kids are done? They want their freedom back. They deserve their freedom back. They want to breathe unobstructed and enjoy school again. That Tuesday was a great day. Let's have more great days. Make Bayport Blue Point mask optional. Be the change our kids need. Do it for them and get back to normal.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Who would like to go next? How are you? If you could just state your name.
Molly Bertrand. I live in Blue Point.
How are you, Ms. Bertrand?
Hello. Good evening. I'm here tonight to advocate for parental choice in this district. Dr. Harney, my husband and I have both reached out to you and the board numerous times over the last 18 months to voice our concerns about COVID mitigation measures in our schools. A few weeks ago, I emailed you a copy of a presentation called The Urgency of Normal. It's a guide for parents and educators to make informed decisions on K-12 schools and extracurricular activities. This presentation is authored by scientists, pediatric, infectious disease, emergency room, and ICU doctors who are all concerned parents. It includes data, analysis, and an agreed-upon conclusion. Our mitigation efforts are having detrimental effects on our children's mental, social, and emotional health. Protecting these for our children must be our top priority. To achieve this, these science and medical professionals urge the following. De-escalate fear around getting COVID. For healthy children, COVID is a flu-like risk, regardless of being vaccinated. Encourage children, parents, and staff to see mild COVID infections as inevitable and not alarming. Change the focus to supporting students' mental, emotional, and social health. Avoid escalating mask rules or other COVID policies. These restrictive policies increase fear and falsely convey that schools in the entire world are unsafe. This increases harm to student mental health, which can have detrimental effects. Do not treat vaccinated and unvaccinated children or adults differently. Children are not in danger. Encourage extracurricular activities and social events without fear. Restore fully normal life in school for all children. That means allowing our children to sit with friends at lunch, allow parents to choose whether or not we want to mask our children. Our children have adapted as best they can, but none of these measures are healthy or normal long term. We need normalcy. Dr. Bruce Farber, the Chief of Public Health of Northwell Health, as many other medical experts, warn us not to panic over these variants and that COVID-19 is endemic. which means it could be here for years, if not decades. Simply put, we cannot hide from this until it goes away, because that day will never come. Dr. Harney and the Board of Ed, we are begging you to please advocate for us. Please write to the government. Please stand with us and ask for change. That's what we want. We're begging you. Please help us fight for parental choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bertrand. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Bertrand.
Good evening. My name is Eric Nicolizium. Live in Blue Point. Been a teacher for 20 years. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. And-
Sir, would you consider putting on your mask?
Excuse me?
Would you consider putting on your mask?
No, good, thank you. The previous two speakers did not even ask them either.
They at least had it by the face.
So, moving forward. How much money have the district got from COVID relief?
Sir, I did say in the beginning, we're going to be answering any questions to the end, but I will put your question
I
down.
can't ask you questions?
You can ask questions, we're going to try to answer them at the end.
Sorry, I can't hear you. Say that again?
We're going to accept your questions, we'll answer them at the end.
So I can ask questions at the end.
No, you can ask questions now, I'm going to write them down. No, please stay.
I
We're
have
going
a question.
No, please ask your questions, I'm just saying, I'm going to write them down, and at the end, we'll do our best to answer them.
The end of, so I have to write them down and give them to you?
No, you just give us the questions, give us your statement, I'll write it down, and at the
Okay.
end, we're going to have a conversation.
Okay, that's, the first one is how much money have you guys gotten for the CARES relief? Okay, thank you. Now, that money has to be spent, and has it been spent already, all of it? If not, how much is still left?
Okay?
Can that money be given back
Give it back to,
to whoever you, to the grant you got it from the federal government?
okay?
Okay? Because with that money, you have to follow certain regulations, asking data and so forth. So I want to know more about that.
Okay?
Give me 1 second. You know what? Here we go. Thank you for your patience. I appreciate it. All right. When does the agreement expire? And if there is another agreement, are we going to have an opportunity to vote on it? Like you guys took money in May, June, I believe, for the second CARES Act, I believe. Do we get to have a say if we take that money?
Okay?
You guys just decide, okay, we're taking it. Because if there is another package in tomorrow, or in, like you said, very fluid, if you do get offered more money, do we have an option as, you know, stakeholders, as residents, to say no to that? Okay, what else? This sounds out of the ordinary, but have any of you been basically threatened with legal action by NYSE to, you know, to comply with DOH mandates? Okay,
Okay?
all right, very good. All right, so I can wait to the end for those answers?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. Thank you, sir. Who would like to come to the podium next? How are you? Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Good evening, Dr. Harney and members of the board. My name is Melissa Zwake. I live in Bayport, and I have 2 children in the district. I know that you've heard from several parents in our community on both sides of the mass debate, and I've heard several pleas for you, the board, to stand with parents who are asking for parental choice and to take action as other school districts have. And the board's response has consistently been that you are simply following the directives from the DOH, the NYSED, and the CDC with the paramount objective of keeping our schools open and in person and limiting quarantines. I know how impossible your position must be, to have to make unilateral decisions for our children in a pressure cooker. I know that you've been operating on the information that you've been given, by the NYSED. However, the data and information around COVID is ever changing, and much has recently emerged. For instance, the CDC has stated that paper and cloth masks are not effective in preventing the spread of COVID-19, and they clearly advise against respirator masks such as N95s for our children. The high number of positive cases in our districts among students and faculty in December and January alone, despite mask enforcement, clearly illustrates that masks in school has failed to stop the spread. Let's also remember that 15 days ago, students in large numbers all over Long Island attended school maskless. If having our students in schools without masks is the deadly super spreader that Kathy Holchel wants us to believe it is, then where are all the positive cases and where are the overflowing hospitals? Vaccines are now available to school-age children and adults with a high survivability rate of the variants that we've recently seen in both children and adults, and we have a much better handle on this virus with the number of severe cases drastically abating. And perhaps the most critical piece that we've learned is that the mask mandate directives pushed by the DOH and the NYSED that our district has been enforcing was recently found in the Supreme Court to be unconstitutional, as we've learned that they are not codified in any statute, they're not executive orders, they've not been passed by a legislator, and they're pretty much non-existent in the New York State Register. So the mandate power that was given to Governor Cuomo to use an emergency state was removed by legislators in March of 2021. Kathy Hochul has circumvented the lawmaking process and misguided executive branch agencies, including the DOH and the NYSED, in enforcing a directive that is unlawful, a directive that you, the board, have based our school policies on. 2 weeks ago, we got to see the joy on the faces of our kids as they entered and exited school, smiling with their friends, and we heard tell of how great it was to be back to normal. Governor Hochul stripped that away from them the very next day, and many parents got to see just how much this is really affecting our children and how much it really does matter to them. And maybe they're not as resilient as we think that they are. With masks being lifted in states all around us and in New York for most of us starting tomorrow, why are we willing to accept the harshest restrictions still be forced on our children when they are the least at risk? I implore you now to please stand up with our children. Fight for their rights and their well-being. Lobby against unconstitutional mandates and reclaim the power to make masks optional in our opening plan and allow parents to make these calls for their own children. Are you now, with all of this information, willing to fight for the ability to stop treating our children like they're walking viruses? Give them the developmental and educational experiences that they so deserve, that they crave, and let them breathe in school without fear. I have one more sentence. Sitting idle, knowingly following and choosing to not challenge orders that are not rooted in logic or science, that are not governed by data or metrics to an end, and that are in direct violation of our constitutional rights, and that ultimately harm the children that you have been entrusted to advocate for, is at some point merely negligence. And I think we've reached that point. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Wick. That's up to him. Thank you, Ms. Wake. Next community member. How are you?
Hi, my name is Tanya Entwistle. I have been in education.
Would you mind just using the microphone? It should be on.
It's not on.
Is it green?
Yes.
Yeah, if you just speak into it, you're going to be good.
Okay, my name is Tanya Entwistle. I have been an educator for a very long time. I thought I would throw a little balance into this conversation. I've seen a lot of not great things happen because I'm pretty old. I'm not wearing this mask because I like wearing the mask. And I'm not wearing the mask because there's a mandate to wear the mask. I'm wearing the mask because it will be a better thing for the community. Now, I'm not saying that everything that comes out from the CDC or anything else is correct. Lots of times it's wrong, lots of times they change it. But you know what? I'm not going to get all bent out of shape about it because things change and you have to be flexible. If you're not flexible, then you're going to get all angry and upset about things that really are a matter of public health. And having the ability to have a vaccine, to use masks, we know that they work. people that are making all these statements about things that don't work, you're cherry picking different situations and so forth. We know what things work as time goes on, and if they don't work, we're trying to change them. But I don't understand why schools, teachers, shopkeepers, and so forth are getting attacked because they're being asked to implement a health measure. It's not fascism. You get your kids vaccinated. They don't come to school without their measles and mumps vaccinations, their polio vaccinations. I lived in a time when there were no polio vaccinations. It was terrible. Now we have a situation where this is a genuine health emergency. Why aren't we all pulling together and trying to do the best thing that we can? If you think that your kids are being so traumatized by having to wear a mask, you should go over to maybe a third world country and see how the kids there live. It's really a lot different. I don't have any kids in
All right,
school.
we'll just keep the comments to the board. Let's just keep the comments to the board.
But I'm also going to say, I know a lot of kids, and I see a lot of kids. I know that wearing a mask is very uncomfortable. I know that kids are going to be uncomfortable. But why not ask your kids to be uncomfortable for something to protect other people? I don't understand that.
I think we just need to be respectful of everyone's comments. Everyone has their own differing opinions. We're going to be respectful, please.
Anyway, what I want to say is you can't drive down the
We're at 2:30.
okay, you can't drive down the road at 90 miles an hour in your car just so you could have the personal freedom to do that. There's lots of things you don't have personal freedom to do. This is not fascism. This is a public.
Be respectful,
It
sir.
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Don't you see that?
I would just say we can be respectful.
You know what?
Everybody has been
And I'm
respectful of
going
your
to just say
time.
this.
Can you keep your
I
comments to
didn't-
the board?
I did not scream and yell at you when you were making your points, even though I had disagreed with it.
Yep, let's turn it to us, please. Turn it to the board, please. Thank you so much for your comments. Guys, if we could just be respectful of everybody, we would truly appreciate it. I know we disagree, but we can disagree in good faith. Everyone has their right to their opinion. Keep your comments, please, to the board. Who would like to come next? Hey, guys, thanks for coming tonight. If you want to stand in front of the podium, that's fine, too. I don't know if you can see over that.
COVID is the worst, and it doesn't affect kids. I can barely breathe, and my ears hurt with a full day of school.
I really feel that it's sad that my little sister has to grow up not knowing what it's like to have a mask, to not have a mask. And I really think masks don't help anyway.
Thank you, guys. We know that took courage. Who would like to go next? Thank you guys so much. I know it was tough coming up here. Thank you guys for doing that. How are you?
Good. Alexander Cavuto. On October 22nd, 2020, I spoke to the board not because I wanted to, not because I felt an obligation as a busy teen to come and speak to a bunch of adults who are in charge of my very education, but I spoke and I speak tonight because a large majority of your students are afraid. They are afraid because they've been taught to comply with guidelines that are affecting them negatively on a daily basis. They are afraid to speak on behalf of an unpopular opinion. And yet while they are afraid, they grow increasingly displeased and angry. And you may not see it, but the masks are harming your students. Tonight, I hope to be a voice for those students. From the beginning of this, the board has taken it upon themselves to suppress the opinions of the very people they were elected to represent. They have taken a side since the beginning. Before the state announced any COVID regulations for the 2020-2021 school year, the district announced that they would be requiring masks for all students and staff. The district also decided to over-regulate attendance for concerts and use less than a fourth of the space that you had available, like your 800-person auditorium here at the high school. And last but certainly not least, at your previous board meeting, parents were denied the ability to speak because they were unmasked. The board did all this while other districts around Long Island waited for guidance from the state before enacting their own policies, did not regulate concert attendance, allowed their auditoriums to be filled, and allowed their community members to speak while unmasked. Not only did districts allow their community members to express their opinions, but some spoke to the state on behalf of their opinions. I hope now you can see why your community members are very frustrated with the board and the district. Throughout these times, we have been taught that wearing an obedience mask is important, and it allows triple vaccinated adults to feel safe. Now, I have no problem with people choosing to wear a mask, just as I should be able to choose not to wear one. But when their paranoia starts to infringe on my rights, that cannot stand. The board has forced us to mask because of their paranoia that standing up to the state will cause board members to be fired and that funding will be cut from the district. The board embraces this paranoia while the districts across the island stand up to the state by writing letters and simply refusing to comply. The board needs to start listening to their community. It has been 2 years of blindly complying with guidance from elected officials who were not put into place to make medical decisions for their citizens. We continue to comply while the COVID survival rate for children is over 99.9%. We hope that the board will take a stand with the other districts of the island and encourage the state to drop the mandates or simply stop enforcing these requirements. It's time we start getting back to living our lives together as a community and allow everyone to do what's best for them. Because overall, your paranoia, the state's paranoia, and the federal government's paranoia does not get to impede on my freedoms. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cavuto. How are you, sir?
Hi, my name is Anthony. I have 2 kids in the district, and hopefully have a third next year in the district. I was hoping to have a dialogue, but a couple of points I wanted to mention was, does the district have the opportunity to accommodate any students that were to come to school with no mask? Because I understand some districts, for example, they have other accommodations. I know schools do. They have prayer rooms where if kids wanted to go to a room to pray, they make accommodations. But if there's kids who are unmasked, could they have a room where they can go and have in-person instruction? And if not, how come? So that was one of my questions. Another thing I wanted to mention was a little frustrating is, we are a family of 6 in my family, and we have a student on the volleyball team for the middle school, but we can't see the game because of the restrictions of only 2 people can go. My wife and I can't go to the volleyball game to watch it because someone obviously needs to stay home with their other children. So, that's something that it's very frustrating when it comes to the restrictions with the masking. Also, I know Dr. Herney, we spoke yesterday. I appreciate the call. I understand at this point, and believe me, there's nobody against the mask more than I am. But at this point, the districts, I understand, can't really do much because of the mandate from the governor. However, the thing that we have to understand, as a community is, we live in New York. And President Obama mentioned that elections have consequences, and these are the consequences that we're stuck with because New York is a supermajority Democrat state. So this is something that, we have to figure out what we're going to do here. As far as the district goes, I know there was a time in August where we had that small opportunity where we could have a choice, and the board voted, I believe, 7-0 for masking, which was very frustrating. I know, Dr. Herney, you explained the idea behind that, and, I do feel that if we had that opportunity again, like you guys said, that you would give that option. But I think the biggest frustration for the parents is they want to feel like the board is fighting for them, is sticking up for them, because you are our voice, and that's why we elected the board. So we just want more support out there, even if it's just about sending letters, even though it may not do nothing, but we just want to feel like the board is in our corner, and that's the biggest frustration. So that's all I have to say at this point. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those comments. Who would like to go next? Any other community members? How are you?
How are you?
Thanks for coming.
Cool. And I have 3 children in the district. I want to start by saying perspective is a funny thing. I heard somebody say tonight, we can't attack the teachers and the staff and everybody, but as an educator for close to 20 years, working in the school system for almost 30, I have to tell you, this is the first time I felt attacked. The first time as an educator in New York State that I feel under attack each and every day for my own private beliefs. I want to tell you that the divide in this community is apparent to anyone here on social media. After the unfortunate adjournment of the last meeting, I watched community members attempt to shame others for their personal beliefs, for the beliefs of their family, and for their beliefs for their children. And I thought to myself how easy it must be to stand there and pass judgment when you haven't had to fight, when you haven't sat here. Some people that are sitting here have been fighting for over a year, well over a year, for nothing. Nothing is happening. It's fruitless. So you're standing there again and again for something that you care about more than anything on this earth, and nothing's happening. Of course they're passionate. Of course they're angry. Of course they're upset. We just want our voices heard. So I'm asking you tonight, I'm not here to argue about how masks work or the statistics of COVID or any of that. What I'm here tonight asking you is what you're doing for us. How are you representing us? Not how are you holding a state mandate, not what you cannot do, but what you are doing for our voices to be heard today. I personally have no say on what anybody in this district, anybody on the face of this earth does. You can wear a hazmat suit. That's fine with me, because it's not my choice, it's yours. So I'm asking you to please, please represent our choice, our freedom.
Thank you so much. Who would like to go next? Yep. How are you?
Hi, I'm a mother of 4 children in the district. 3 of my 4 children attend Blue Point Elementary School, and the 4th is entering kindergarten in the fall. I've always been a big supporter of the Board of Education. I recognize that the community volunteers join to advocate and, if necessary, lobby to protect our children's education system. As an active community member, parent, coach, PTA volunteer, I hope you find my words have weight. Since 2016, when my oldest child entered the district, I've supported the Board of Education on numerous occasions, rallied for parents to vote in favor of the school budgets, and always offered free time to better the community and the schools. I'm asking you to reciprocate this support. It is with extreme disappointment that I have to stand up here and call out on the very people I once revered as wonderful assets to the community. Today, you are not those people. You are the people that have literally sold out the academic freedom of our community's children and hung an indivisible, yet literal airway noose around the community's children. As a mother, it breaks my heart to send my children to school where their health is being jeopardized. They are suffering emotionally, socially, and mentally. COVID is virtually a non-existent threat to children, yet we are compromising their well-being by complying to unconstitutional mandates. We can do better. In the elementary school my children attend, they have assigned seating 6 feet apart for lunch. When not actively eating, they must keep the mask up. When the lunchroom gets too loud, they turn off the lights to hush the children, okay? Maybe if they weren't so far apart and masked up, they wouldn't have to scream to have a conversation. Second grade classrooms, if a student is caught with the mask deemed inappropriately worn, they have their ticket taken away, something that was previously given to them for good behavior. It's essentially shaming the kids if they aren't muzzled properly. My 5th grader was sent home with a think sheet for saying COVID sucks while reporting a current event about masks in schools. What are we doing here? brainwashing kids to believe they are a threat to society if they don't wear a mask, and furthermore, shaming them for saying how they feel about it. I've personally heard my children say it's hard to breathe. It's a distraction. They have raw skin behind their ears. They're emotionally devastated by the mitigation methods, and this needs to stop. At what point do we look at the data and realize that our children are not vulnerable to the effects of COVID, but they are most negatively affected, and we have no reason to let it continue? If our children are unmasked outside of school, at sporting events, birthday parties, family gatherings, if they go to a restaurant and sit down and eat a meal with no mask, why in the world can't we come up with a compromise in schools? Would it be possible to at least allow them to remove the mask if they are sitting at their desk 6 feet apart? You've told us your hands are tied and you have no choice. But as representatives for this district, you do have a voice. I am begging you at least attempt to stand up for parental choice for our district's unconstitutional mask mandate for the sake of our children. Take a stand now, not later.
Thank you so much. How are you?
Hi, my name is Kate Hanley, and I have 3 children in the school district. One who's a senior, my daughter who's in 10th grade, and then my little guy who's in 3rd grade. And I think that when I think about what's going on right now, I think about the little kids because they don't have a voice. And my son today, he had like an allergy or something, and he sneezed, and he was told to sneeze into his mask. And I don't think that adults are sneezing into their masks. I don't think that adults are constantly told, put it over your nose, put it over your nose. Like, it's going on way too long. And I think that a lot of parents in the district that may not be here tonight don't realize the magnitude of what is going on to our littlest students. My older girls, they're not as affected. But when I look at my son, who's in 3rd grade, and when he has snack in school, they have put smiley faces and stars. Half the class have smiley faces, half the class has stars. And when it's the stars' turn to eat snack, the other kids have to have their mask on and wait their turn. It has gotten bizarre. It has gotten absolutely bizarre, and people are not realizing the detriment that this is doing to an entire generation. And as a mother, I just feel like it's my obligation and so I can put my head down at night to think that I'm doing everything I can. I can't stand it anymore, and it hurts me to think all these kids every day, 6 hours a day. I'm not wearing a mask 6 hours a day. None of us are. Honestly, none of us are. And, you know, to the older woman who spoke earlier, I have my parents. My parents kind of feel that way. And they don't understand. And you have to sometimes have a really empathetic heart and not just look at ourselves, but we need to look at these children. We are their protectors. We are their voices. And when they come home and they say the things that they say, and it's like, well, this teacher wasn't even wearing a mask and she told me to sneeze into mine. I mean, or an aide or a paraprofessional or whatever. But we just have to be the advocate. And, you know, it's like my dying breath is going to be that. And I'm sorry, I get emotional, but I'm listening to all these parents. They really, really care. And sometimes it appears like, oh, you know, you're kind of on, like, this, you know, an opposing view or something. But I'm 100% for the school. I'm 100% for every single student. And I just want their voices to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? How are you?
Hello, I'm Jenna Michelizzi. I live in Blue Point. First of all, the sound system needs to be fixed. It's pretty bad. Can you add that to the to-do list? Because all this feedback is pretty bad. I think we can afford a better sound system. So I have some questions because you said that you've sent letters. I want to know how many letters you've sent to support parent rights, because I think in my tally is just one. I want to know what those fines are that you mentioned earlier specifically. And I'm here, you know, I know your hands are tied in many ways, but again, kind of like what another member said, I want to know what can you do to help lighten this insanity, because the children recognize that it's insane, the little ones, especially as you know, you go to a restaurant, which I'm sure a lot of you frequent restaurants, you don't have to take turns eating at a restaurant, right? So the children are aware that this is not year one of the pandemic and all of this is dumb. I don't know why this security guard wouldn't let me sit near my husband. I mean, what the heck? Do you do that at basketball games? I don't see it. And this is another thing, and I apologize for sounding, you know, unprofessional, but you say we have to follow these rules, but do you see the hypocrisy in your district? I mean, you live stream every sporting event, and I have screenshots of every event where you have a security guard standing in the corner, plenty of parents not being bullied and harassed with their masks down. So if you want to say we have to wear our masks, then you can't be hypocritical about it. It was really disgraceful how you silenced us at the last meeting after you got to say what you had to say. I mean, it doesn't make sense. Why was it okay that we had our masks down when you had to say what you had to say, but not for when we wanted to say what we had to say? So again, my big question is, what can you do? And I'm an educator for 20 years. I see around 300 students a year minimum. My class sizes are 50 kids at a time, okay? So I have data for you, all right? I want to know, in general, why are the athletes allowed to be unmasked? And listen, I'm an athletic family. I think they should be allowed to be unmasked. But why is my 7-year-old not allowed to take a mask break in certain classes when you guys allow your athletes and the athletes' parents to be unmasked, and it's all over your YouTube channel? It's disgusting. It's insane, okay? I'm wondering why the parents of athletes aren't being harassed at concerts like my husband and I were. I mean, the music program, first of all, music is state mandated. It's part of the curriculum. It's not co-curricular, okay? The concerts, students need an audience for a concert to feel like a real musician. I mean, it was great. Of course, everyone's just satisfied that we're sort of getting back to normal, but it was ridiculous. We were yelled at when our masks went below our noses at the concert. You're not doing that to the athletic families. I'm telling you that right now. So again, don't treat the families like unequal, you know, parties in this community. I want to know, you know, my kids are elementary age, but I teach secondary. You have to bring the cafeteria tables back, okay? Kids are isolated. Kids that have anxiety and are depressed it's visible that they're isolated. No one's sitting with them. They're not able to socialize. This is like the biggest part of schooling is socialization. I need you to please evaluate the lunch situation. See what can you do to make it better. The kids haven't changed seats all year in the elementary school. They're just walking in and out like prisoners. Can you please direct your staff across the board to stop telling kids to put their masks over their nose constantly, because they're hired to teach curriculum, right? So why do kids have to hear this all day? Kids that are keeping their masks on and complying, they should be learning, right? Teachers aren't paid to be the COVID police. So can you please tell them to back off a little bit? Let's see, what else? I'm just saying from personal experience, I have students that don't even want to take the mask off because they think their faces are ugly and they don't want their faces to be seen. So that's pretty sad. What else? I'm just really hoping you won't turn a blind eye to what everyone's saying here and just realize that kids are suffering, okay? And maybe not all kids are suffering. Maybe some kids are fine wearing the mask all day, just as maybe some adults are. But there's a huge majority that are really suffering mentally And it's time we really advocate for them, and again, maybe focus on mental health and more programs to help them. And I just want to say one thing to the community, that 2 years ago when we did reopen, parents put out a petition and begged the community, please vote so that we have a virtual option. And I, along with many others, signed that, even though I knew I couldn't send my kids virtually. So I think it's time our community kind of like get a little reality check and support one another, just as we supported parents who wanted that virtual option 2 years ago. So again, I beg of you, if you need to form like a committee with the parents, what can we do to make improvements? I think it's time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Who would like to go next?
How are you?
How are you, sir? Thanks for coming tonight.
Good evening. My name is Bill Graham. I have 3 kids in the school district. This mandate going away soon, that's great news. But that's not my fear. My fear is the next time. I think we can all agree that's great. But what is the school board prepared to do the next time is my fear. I would ask the school board, would they be prepared to send out ballots so that the taxpayers could take a vote to help you to decide as to what to do if we had another spike? If you want to tell me, no, we're not going to do that, I'd like to know why. I know you're going to answer questions at the end. I look forward to it. Why you wouldn't do that. And if part of that answer is they're going to pull funding or all this stuff, I'd like to know what that means exactly. When I hear funding or I hear penalties, I know that another woman had just mentioned that. I'd like to have an itemized list of what that means exactly to us so we can all make an informed decision. And if you represent us to the state, I don't see why you couldn't strongly consider our opinion to them. And if we are prepared to take those penalties as a community, that's our business. So that's just what I would like to say, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name is Liana McCormack, and I live in Bayport, and I'm a freshman in the Bayport Blue Pine High School. For the past week and a half, I have been segregated in school because I refused to wear a mask after it had been declared unconstitutional to enforce masks in school. I have been denied a proper education for standing up for my constitutional rights. Over the past week and a half, I have had to teach myself everything. I've had to take tests, quizzes, and complete projects and assignments that I know nothing about. In what world is that considered an education? If masks really did work, shouldn't every student that did not wear a mask on January 25th have COVID? Shouldn't we all have been out sick and been in Q school? I was told by one of my teachers 2 days after January 25th that they did not have a single student in Q school. Not a single one in high school. Over the past 2 years, I have rarely worn my mask because I can't tolerate it, only to appease others and participate in activities that bring me joy. So if masks really prevented the spread of COVID-19, then why am I still healthy? Why haven't I tested positive for COVID over the past 2 years? While many people I know that are very cautious about wearing their mask tested positive for COVID not only once, but twice. What does that show you? Enforcing masks is unconstitutional, especially to force children to wear them in order to get an education that they have the right to be receiving. And never in a million years should a child be denied a fair and equitable education for trying to breathe. I am a child, but before that, I am a person, and all people deserve to breathe freely. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCormick. How are you?
Good evening. My speech has changed a little bit due to very recent developments, so it's briefer too.
If you could just state your name quick?
Excuse me?
If you could just state your name quick?
Oh, Lynn Bowden.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks. 2 weeks to stop the spread. Essential workers. We're all in this together. The new normal. Of all the sickening phrases that have emerged during this 2-year pandemic, the one I detest most is trust the science. Why? Because it contradicts everything we've been taught about science, in science classes at every level. Science is supposed to be debated, not trusted. If it's not peer-reviewed and can't be questioned, it's not science, it's propaganda. Mask mandates. I think they're less about safety and more about submission. Masks are effective at blocking bacteria, but they do not block viruses. As per FDA regulation, and I did work in the pharmaceutical industry, a box of surgical masks must list the following disclaimer: does not protect against rhinoviruses and coronaviruses. That's because a virus is 1 micron in size. The average pore size of an ordinary mask is about 80 microns. Now, Governor Hochul was recently photographed unmasked with a group of young school children. If she really believed and trusted the science peddled by Dr. Fauci, she would not be violating the very mandates she imposes on we the people. Of course, following laws is essential to maintaining a civilized society, but it's equally essential to question and stand up against abuse. History is replete with examples of atrocities committed by dictators, tyrants, and those just following the rules. So yesterday, we started hearing that the science has changed. How many of you heard that? Well, the medical science, I disagree. The medical science has not changed. It's the political science that has changed, because politicians are now feeling the heat of voters like me that are fed up. What we've been living through is not normal, and I don't want my children getting used to the idea that this is normal. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your comments. Who would like to go next? How are you, and thanks for coming.
Hello, my name is Carolyn Serrano. I have one daughter in the district, one to come in, maybe. I only have one question. Well, actually I have two. One, I appreciate that you're having this meeting after last one was really abruptly stopped. But I wanted to find out from you, I want a real direct answer as to what you are doing with these comments from the public. Is this actually going to do anything in terms of changing how you've been handling this for the last 2 years, or a year and a half? And I have a question for the lawyer. What is the liability of the board when you are following an unlawful, unconstitutional mandate from a governor who is not elected, who has also just given herself emergency powers that were actually stopped by the legislator? They pulled it from Cuomo before. So those are my two questions.
Thank you so much. Any other questions before we start going down the list of questions?
evening. I
How are
would
you?
like to request more than 3 minutes from the board to discuss a couple of items that I have on my list of things to talk about today.
I think we've been pretty fair with time for everyone. I don't think it's fair that we've given you more than 3, and we pretty much stopped everybody at about 3 minutes.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. What?
We've been keeping it pretty tight to 3 minutes, so we'd ask you to keep it to about 3 minutes.
Okay, I am respectfully asking the board to actually vote to allow me to have additional time to discuss matters that I have with the board.
Ms. McCormick, please proceed.
I'm sorry?
Please proceed.
So are you denying the motion? Are you guys denying that vote?
I'm just asking you to proceed.
Okay. So I will take that as a denial for my respectful request for additional time to discuss several things on my list. I have been involved in school matters since my children started school. Actually, prior to their entering kindergarten, that's back in 2015. I've gotten involved through the PTA as the treasurer. I've gone to trainings. I've read every single board training material. I have gone through policies of the school. I have read audited financial statements of the school. I'm a very well-informed parent. And I know you know that. I've had many discussions with you guys in regards to many policies that the school have broken. And I have even helped bring transparency to the school in the past. I have dealt with past board presidents to bring electronic financials to the board, have even shown them that it's capable, that it's available on the website. And I thank the board for allowing that to go on and working with me to help make transparency in the school district be available. So my question is, there are times when the board goes above and beyond, or maybe you don't do it on purpose, to break laws and policies, such as the New York State tax law that prevents the school from carrying over 4% of unappropriated fund balance. In the past, that has been done many, many years, and nobody, until the U.S. Comptroller realized that this was happening, that the schools were carrying over too much funds, and stopped this practice. However, last year, our school, maybe it's because we had COVID and school wasn't in session, our school carried over more than 4% of the allowable unappropriated fund balance. And it's right in the management letter, it's right in the financial statements, it's right on the website. So, in addition to that, I have been to every board meeting or via online or in person, and you know I've been here, and I'm a very informed parent, like I said. I've sat here since August of 2021 pleading for parental choice and discussions of the board where I even actually had to ask the board to vote to see how everyone feels about this mask mandate. Yet, open meetings laws states that you guys have to publicly discuss these things. However, I was told by a board member that you guys have had extensive discussions regarding mask mandates. However, I have not once seen a public discussion of how the board feels on these mask mandates. The other day, I sent the board the videotape of Sachem board having public discussion, public discourse, and I sent that to you guys so as an example of what open meetings law is and how it should be practiced. I thank you for having this special meeting and taking the time to address these concerns after the meeting, as Sachem board did. There are a couple of things that the Sachem board meeting also touched upon. That was one, contact tracing. They voted at that meeting to actually take away and do away with contact tracing. My question today is that something that the board is looking to discuss tonight? And if you can discuss in public session in regards to that, and if that is something that you guys would do away with
Mr.
contact
Coleman, can
tracing.
you just repeat that? Are you asking the board, would we get rid of contact tracing? Is that what you're saying?
To vote,
Yeah.
to make a motion to vote to do away with contact tracing, because that is not a requirement by Suffolk County Department of Health.
If you could just start wrapping it up though, please?
Yep, I will do so. With that said, I want to thank every one of you, because I know it's not a very easy job. Everyone here says here, it's a volunteer position. Yes, it's a volunteer position, you guys don't get paid, but you guys run, you guys get elected. We the people vote you in, and we the people should have the opportunity to ask you questions and get them fairly answered. Information brings confidence and trust. And when you lack that, you lose the trust of the people. And I hope that we have the opportunity to work together to bring cohesiveness into our district, because right now it's divided. I'm going to leave you with you guys with this. I know that you guys are under the orders of New York State Department of Health and New York State Department of Education. They are regulatory agencies, and in 2017, the legislatures did give them the power to put regulations in place that they best fit, they think that will help the public health. However, they are going through the backdoor policies because they know that the legislative session will not allow this to go on. There's a loophole in that, and there is actually a bill in place by Jared Gandolfo, our own assemblyman, that is sponsoring with a few other assemblymen to make sure that this backdoor policy of putting regulations in place no longer happens. I will conclude with this. When you're following orders, as you state you are doing, by masking our children and not giving parental choice the option, there is a code, U.S. Code Title 21, Chapter 9, Subchapter 5, Part E, Section 360 BBB-3. In this code, it states, and it pertains to, the authorization for medical products for use in emergencies. This code states that appropriate conditions designed to ensure that individuals to whom the product is administered are informed of the option to accept or refuse administration of the product, of the consequence, if any, of refusing administration of the product, and the alternatives to the product that are available and of their benefits and risk. The board policy also states that you shall not discriminate against sex, religion, disability, and other, I don't even know, ways. Right now, I am notifying you guys that my children are mentally disabled due to this mask mandate, and they should not be discriminated against, segregated, isolated, and not be provided a fair and equitable education. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. McCormick. Anyone else before we start going through the questions?
Hi, Antonia Sauter. I agree this mic is terrible, and I also think we can agree on like 90% of what makes our kids happy and Blue Point great. I also want to say that I really appreciated the rapid test. Personally, caught the fact that I had COVID, so thank you. And Nurse V, thank you so much for all the work that you've been doing. I know we're all tired of the masks. I'm thankful that hopefully our community spread is low enough that we can get to the point where we don't have to wear them. I know we're all tired. I'm grateful that some of the parents who are immunocompromised, because there are people who have cancer, and I take care of some of them personally, that we've been doing our best to keep the school as safe as possible. I know we're all tired. I wish that we could do the community survey that we did at the beginning of COVID, just to get a temperature test on where everybody in the school district is feeling. I think that would be helpful. And maybe if some of the COVID funds could go to like social emotional well-being and some sort of program that could help us in the healing transition part of this, because it sucked. And I think we can all agree on that. Look forward to the Irish Day parade. That's going to be awesome. Thank you for everything you've done for us. And I hope that sometime in March, our community spread will be low enough that hopefully the healthcare officials agree we can take off the masks. And thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else before we open it up to the live stream?
Hi, Patrick Root from Blue Point. I'm not going to debate COVID tonight. Really, it's actually a question, though, for the district. When it's actually to do with the elementary schools, the hours seem to have been cut after COVID came. I'm curious, when COVID's gone, when the health officials say it's time to take off the mask, not the board, I'm surprised how much this community wants to give that power to you guys, but that's another story. I'm just curious, when do we go back to the original times at the elementary schools where you could drop a kid off at 8:40, the time starts at 9:05, and they get out at 3:20? Because right now, I think they're losing about 15 minutes per day of instruction, and I think that works out to like 45 hours a year. So I don't know if there is anything going to be changed soon, if we do away with the mask, when we're going to go back to regular times.
Mr. Rube, just so we got the question, when, once the pandemic or the mask regulation is removed, will the original times go back at the elementary school?
Yes, correct. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other community members before we open it up to the live stream? I'll read that one statement. I would like to ask the board if they believe in the science of masking a 5-year-old for 6 hours a day against an airborne virus. If we remove the mask mandate, will social distancing and contact tracing policies in schools change? Like that. Just so no one's offended when you see this, there's a lot of people going back and forth with comments to each other, not a lot of comments to the board. Thank you. Any other comments? Well, before we have a discussion and try to answer all your questions, I just really want to say thank you so much. This has been a great night. I'm going to be totally honest with you. I was not sure how this night was going to go. I think we're all a little anxious how it was going to happen. A lot of people were recommending we should be virtual. We did not want to do that. We want to be in person. We want to be together. So thank you guys so much for the respect you've shown tonight, and thank you guys so much for your questions. I know we may have different opinions, but I think we will get through it. But again, thank you guys so much. So I think this will be the first one. I'll give it to Mr. Block. I'm not sure who asked it, but what can the BOE do? Really a 3-part question. I'll take it one at a time. What can the Board of Education do to show support for the community?
Yeah, come on. Okay, thanks. Yeah, what can the board do? Well, again, I addressed, the board has the ability to be able to advocate. I know there was the question about putting it up issues before the voters, as a voter referendum, which would be advisory in nature, and the commissioner has repeatedly said that's improper. And I'm segueing into another question that was asked. The ability to be able to survey, though, as was mentioned by one resident who spoke toward the end, the board does have that ability to be able to reach out to the community as part of surveys to seek opinions from the community. But again, in terms of what the board can do in terms of taking positions, it is really with respect to when you're dealing with regulations, when you're dealing with state-issued mandates, is to advocate, and that's was expressed by a number of the residents as something that they would like to see the board do, quite frankly.
What happens if we do not follow the mask regulation?
So at the disposal of the state are basically three forms of penalty. The most financially egregious is the withholding of aid money that the school district relies upon. The school receives millions of dollars in aid on an annual basis, and the state has the discretion to be able to withhold that. There's also $1,000 a day, up to $1,000 a day fine for each day of non-compliance. And the Commissioner of Education has the unilateral authority to remove individual board members from their office for willfully disobeying a law, in this case, a regulation.
Thank you, Mr. Block. Going to Dr. Harney. Dr. Harney, one of the questions, accommodating students with medical exemptions, or if I want to not wear a mask in school, how would I go about that?
Yes, so we've kind of looked into this. So if there was a student who was unable to wear a mask for a medical reason, or even like a socially emotional reason, in some of the guidance that they've given us, if we can then receive medical documentation, then we would put the student to like a 504 process, who would then the committee would decide on what accommodation would be appropriate to accommodate that child so that they could be in school. So really the biggest thing first is we would need that documentation.
Thank you, sir. The gentleman right here was asking about the Federal CARES Act, and also was there any lawsuits that we know of from NYSET?
So I'm not sure of anything from NYSET, so that one I do not know. The Federal CARES Act, and you're really talking about two different funds. You're talking about the ARP, which is the American Rescue Plan or program. That's one. And then you're also talking about the CARISA money. Last year we were allocated, I would say, I'm going to give you rough numbers now, so just don't hold me to it. It's about $780,000 for the ARP and about $1.8 million for the CARISA, okay? Now, how they came out when they did it, you asked what happens if you don't use it. I'm assuming then they just keep it, is what my guess is. They did give us restrictions on how it could be used, and the simplest way for me to put it is it's really supposed to be used for anything that is COVID related. So, for example, we have allocated a lot of money to do some updating of, even filters and filtration, those things. You can use it. They advise you to use it for a lot of one-time type of purchases because you need to be able to fund, if you do something for long-term, then you need to be able to fund it after the money runs out, because you get the money over a 3-year period. So you can, it's not additional money each year, it's that sum of money that I gave you, you can use it over the 3 years. You can also use it for what they call a learning loss. So like, for example, this past summer, we put in a pre-K program for students coming into kindergarten for summer, which we'll do again this summer. And we were able to use money for that. So we were able to use some of that money for that. If we were doing after-school programs like we were doing last year, you can use the money for that. And again, then you can use it for items, as I said, whether it be filters or venting or things along those lines. But it's really supposed to be something that is COVID related. You could use it for, mitigation factors. If you need it, for example, within there you can talk about items like we're looking to purchase more outdoor type of classrooms. So that is something that we're going to talk about. So you could use it for that. So those are the things that that's really for. So that's basically it. I think I answered your questions.
Offered
So that's a good point. So what happened was when we originally had to do this, and if you go back to an earlier board meeting, I want to say it was probably spring or summer, we actually had to do a presentation to the community on how we were going to spend the money, and we were to take feedback. That was done. So my guess is, if they were to do it again after the 3 years, my guess is you'd have to do the same thing. Okay, so there is a presentation. I think it's, I don't know the answer off the top of my head, and I don't know if Mr. Frontario knows that, I don't know where he's sitting because we're different spots. I don't know, or if it's just one of those things, if you don't use it, they just take it, I don't know.
I think you had a file, your plan had to be approved, and the sense is that if you're not gonna use it, it's gonna end up being back in the state coffers, if they would take it back. But we're gonna use it, so.
Yeah. Again, when the money was given to, so for example, right now, in terms of, we are actually going to be adding something to the high school. Now, this is not for last summer. We will be adding something where students are identified who may be struggling to help them get through if they have the regents this year. So that is something that they are doing. They added the extra classes last year, also at the middle school. So that is things that we had done. So as I said before, is we put a whole presentation together of things that we were going to use the money for at that time. And if things come up as we're going now, we are allowed to make alterations to it. So that is something we always continue to look at.
Thank you, Dr. Harney.
As always, whenever I'm going to do a presentation, I send the community a letter basically telling you what, an information telling you what we're going to be doing that night. We had done that, and then at that night, we presented it to the board, and we presented it to the community, and we were taking any feedback that night during an open forum. We also did it in various other meetings, because it involves all stakeholders. We did it at faculty meetings, if I recall. Dr. Fulton, I don't know if there was any of the other ones we talked about.
In addition to the multiple presentations, because the plan we also presented when it was updated to the board. We have multiple shared decision-making bodies that the plan was reviewed, solicited feedback for ideas, and then that was how we culled down the list for what was our final product.
Was that information relayed to the public that was contingent upon COVID regulations?
It was really, the only thing that was always relayed, I'm sorry, I'm misunderstanding the question. What was always relayed is that we were only allowed to use the money for COVID-related items. So anything that you could attach to something from a COVID. So that's why, to COVID. So that's why I said, like, for example, we want to put outdoor classrooms in, right, where we can bring some seating outside. And it's not just really a COVID thing, it's something that we'd like to do for the future. But because they always talked about having classes outside, we could attach it to that money, and that's one of the things we had chosen. When I was talking before about regents or learning loss, because last year we were on the hybrid model for 3/4 of the year, if there were things we could do, that's what we were talking about. Anything isn't, you always heard within the, related to COVID, I said it before, was, ventilation and those. So that's really what we were using it for. So I don't remember ever, and I'd have to go back because I have not looked at it in a little bit, is in terms of, hey, if they said, you don't follow this, is that the money they're taking away? That wasn't, I'd have to ask the attorney. It was always about aid and things along those lines. So I don't know if this followed the same. No, I don't remember any of the, and I'd have to go back, so I don't want to be, but as I said, it was always about you had to use it for a COVID-related item. And matter of fact, after the presentation, we have to then submit everything to the state. Yeah, so, but when we submit it to the state, all we're submitting is basically what we are using the money for. There's nothing else attached to it. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Dr. Harney.
And those plans too will also have been posted on our website.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to reference exactly what the plan is for the CRISA funds and the ARP funds, they are on the website. We do have the flexibility to make adjustments with regards to monetary amounts because it's over a 3-year period. If we do that, we would then need to update the public and then update the documents that are online. But that would not be something that is done in a vacuum.
So if monies are offered again, are we going to have a vote, or do you guys, I know you said you had results in the form?
I'm assuming, and again, you're asking the same question again, is I'm assuming that they would give the same parameters is what I'm guessing. So my guess is you would have to open it up, you'd have to do, get feedback from the various stakeholders like we had done the first time. That's my guess. There has been no talk, because it's over 3 years, they have not had any talk that I am aware of that's saying, hey, you're going to get another shot at this.
Thank you, Dr. Harney. A few more questions just came in from the chat. No, if we could just we're just going to keep moving forward though, please. If we could just keep moving forward with some of these questions. If the mask mandate is removed, how can you promise me that my child will not be bullied or put down or made to feel bad if they continue to wear a mask?
I think that's a question and there's a lot of discussions now that we have to start to think about as we're going forward, as you heard the governor today. And a lot of it is referenced around some of the questions that were asked tonight. So for example, I think that's something we would have to do continuously at the building level. If there are things specific that the person is referring to, then I would ask them to reach out to their school specifically so that we could follow up.
Thank you, Dr. Harney. Really a question about building use forms or just in general. The playgrounds, the courts, the turf field, is that open on the weekends for our students or are they not allowed on this?
No, they've been open for a while now.
Last question was really for the board. Will the board fight against a vaccine mandate? I'll answer that one. The board did write a letter. I don't know the exact date, but the board really requested an option very similar to the same option that staff have right now for the vaccine mandate, just so everyone is aware. That is posted on the website if you'd like to see that. I'm sorry, what was the question? No. Oh, that would have to be a conversation you have to talk to the board about. That's a good question, though. This is for Dr. Harney. What would happen if my child, and I think we went through this a month ago, refused to wear a mask?
So typically what we have done is if a student has refused the mask and we have not had medical documentation, typically then we would have a conversation, somebody from the school would have a conversation with the student, then reach out to mom and dad, and if it's still there and we have no documentation, we would actually ask to have the child picked up until we had that information.
Thank you, Dr. Harney. And really a follow-up to the same question. If we can prove medically by a doctor's note and going through a 504 plan, would my child be allowed to remove their mask while in schools if approved by the 504 committee?
They're asking a lot of questions that I would have to have all the information for, to be honest with you. But if, in all honesty, if they went through a 504 and then the 504 committee came up with accommodations that could be in place, then just for example, when a student goes to a CSE or a 504, it would be similar to, for example, a peanut allergy, where we would have to implement what was ever came out of the committee.
Next question, we'll get back to Dr. Harney. This is Mr. Rube, I believe. The times at the elementary school.
It's interesting you bring that up because we actually brought that up today in our instructional council. We have an instructional council made up of various our teachers and administrators, and that actually came up today. And my answer at that point was, that's a great question. And my feeling would be is if we went back to where you did not have to worry about social distancing and we were not in the mask and that stuff, my quick answer this afternoon was yes, we would go back to what our normal times were and procedures were. That would be my hope. It's tough to answer without not knowing what's going to come next. Because even, for example, people have talked about it tonight, and you have to think about this, is when they say that the schools can go optional, there are still things that we need ideas. And if any of you followed the governor today, one of the things she spoke about was this toolkit. That is very important to us from a district standpoint. And the reason I say that, if they decide to go optional in the mask, there are a lot of things in the current guidance, guidelines, whatever you want to say, that contradict each other. For example, people brought up in August and why the board at that time, and off a recommendation that I had made, had talked about putting on the mask before the mandate became in. If you recall, when the distance was reduced from 6 feet to 3 feet, and this was based on, I think it was a document dated August 12th, okay, they said at that point, if students were masked at that time and somebody happened to be positive within that classroom and everyone had a mask, nobody would have to quarantine. And one of our goals has always been to have students in school. It's actually been one of our themes for the past 2 years. You've heard me constantly speak about we want to have students in school. We want to educate them in school. At that time, okay, before, and we all had a feeling that they were going to do the mandate, at that time, let's say the way we are sitting right now and somebody in the middle turns up positive, well then everybody around that child is being quarantined. And now if you're doing that at the high school level, you're talking about one student who goes to 7 or 8 classes. And again, this is based on the guidance that was given to us, that you could have just do 9 times 6, right? That's 54 students who could possibly be quarantined. That was one of the reasons when we had talked about this back then, was we were trying to keep as many kids in school as possible. So when they're talking about this, I'll talk to you from my perspective as a superintendent, and my other superintendents would tell you the same thing, is we need to have all the updated guidance. For example, they lowered the quarantines from 10 days to 5 days. Everybody thinks it's great, but it's predicated on that the student wears masks for 10 days. Those are things that would have to be updated from us from a school standpoint. So I'm hoping when they're going to make this change, if you followed her today, she said on March 4th, I think was the date that she was really looking at, because she wanted to see that week after the break, that they don't hand us a toolkit on March 6th and say you got to do something March 7th. That's what I'm hoping. That's where some of my frustration lies in this, because over the 2 years, we typically find out stuff after you, because usually it's on social media first. So those are some of the things that we're trying to kind of manipulate. So I know, for example, people have asked what else have we done. I constantly reach out to some of our legislators and our politicians. Our state association, NISCUS, which you heard was in a meeting yesterday. I was not part of that meeting. I was not invited. I'm not part of their executive council. They talked about kind of the same idea. What is the exit plan? How do we kind of move and go towards this? So that was one of the things that they had done. Today I had a meeting with my Suffolk County soups. They are talking about putting something together similar so that we can have it, whatever is called this exit plan. Well, I'm just using that for my words right now, but how do we move forward? Because there's too many things within this that contradict each other right now. So that's what we're trying to make sure that we have in place so that we can all go forward and, kind of keep everybody here. So I know I kind of went off a little bit, but I think that's important for everybody to know and some of the things that are going on. I'm not sure what you mean with schedules. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Thanks, guys. Dr. Hardy, this one just in.
No. No, I don't want you to be putting words in. I don't want you to put words into my mouth. What I was saying is what I'm hoping is that they're talking about this toolkit, that they do give it. And you're absolutely right. It came that January 25th. We did go optional right away, which is, as you've heard Mr. Miller talk about all the time. I'm just talking from a school standpoint so that everyone also has all the information. I'm hoping they get us that information, or they line everything up so that at that point, everything is kind of going smoothly. I'm just talking from my past right now. Typically, we get something on a Friday night, Sunday night, Christmas Eve that talks about, hey, these are the changes that are coming with really no feedback. So that's kind of where our frustration is as an agent, from a superintendent association.
Thank you, Dr. Harney. Dr. Harney, one question. There was a presentation about a year and a half ago about ventilation in the schools. Would the board, or would you consider providing a list of new ventilation, or having a small presentation, or just sharing this somehow with the community to see what school buildings actually have newer ventilation? Because I know we did have a presentation on that, I think, about a year.
Yeah, we can probably do that twofold. It will take us a little time. One is what has been done, and then I can also talk about, kind of answers the question before, what else is also in this new funding that we're trying to do as well.
Right, and I think that was the question. What does it look like pre-pandemic, and what does it look
Yeah,
like now?
if you give us a little time, because we're trying to work on the budget stuff right now, and then also transportation and pre-K, I can definitely do that for you, though.
Absolutely.
I'm sure Mr. Bortsfield wouldn't mind helping me with that.
Thank you, sir. There was a question about the 4% fund balance, and how the district is over that this year.
Yeah, that is an accurate statement that Ms. McCormick had made, is that for years, I will tell you this, if you're following anything at the state level, districts for a long time have been asking for there be exemptions to that 4% for various reasons. It's up in Albany again this year that they're looking for that. And the reason being is, so this year, Ms. McCormick is right, we are over the 4%. And the reason being at that time, after conversations with our auditors, they agreed with us in making the suggestion, because we didn't know at that time when you have to close the books. For example, if we were going to need other COVID-related type of expenses. For example, if we were then going to have to add additional staff again, because say we had to lower our class sizes again, or if there was something that came out that we had to do immediately because it was unpredictable for the year. So instead of delving into money that was already allocated, we did go over the 4%. And we are aware of that. And if we don't use it, it will go into the reserves as would any money that was more of a surplus from one year to the next. But we did that with our auditors knowing. And they did say we would get noted on it, which we knew, but he says many places are doing that for that reason.
Thanks, Dr. Harney. The next one was really from the students over here, and Ms. McCormick over there. I would just want to say, I believe one of the students said that they don't know school without being in a mask. We sympathize with that, and we're really sorry. I have a child too. I don't get personal up here much, but my daughter also is in pre-K in a local school, and she does not know school without a mask. So we definitely sympathize with all students who have never been to school without wearing a mask. And to Ms. McCormick, I'm sorry you're going through that. I'm sorry you're frustrated. I'm sorry your high school experience is not what you thought it could be. And we're hoping that when this pandemic is over, all students will be back to the high school experience that they so badly want. That's a conversation for a different time. I don't want to speak for the district on that. Dr. Harney, if I come to school and I don't have a mask, will the district provide me a mask? Basically what they're saying is, should the parents be providing masks, or should the schools be providing masks?
I mean, for the past 2 years, we have purchased extra sanitizer, mask, anything that goes along with that. So if a child came without one, yes, we could give them one. It was really more to speak about some of the things that are going on in the district, to be honest with you, given various points of view. And I was trying to get information to find out did they have any indication of where the governor was going with this? That was the majority of the conversations. The one thing we also did speak about, which I'm sure you're aware of, she continuously, or actually many of them reinforced the idea, and I had spoken about this probably in our December meeting, The best way is also for each of you to send individual letters and not to send the same letter. They want individual letters because that's coming from them, obviously the public, whereas us, we're one entity. They'd rather have them, because that's the stuff that they could bring forward with them. And they ask that it's not a template, because that's something that they look at, that it is a little bit more personalized. So that is something else that she had shared with us, that I shared, I want to say it was probably in December when I had said that. I don't want to speak for the committee because I don't sit on the committee, but my guess is there would need to be some type of documentation that would say for the reason why the student wouldn't be able to wear a mask. That's my guess.
A few more questions in the chat about what would the 504 committee do with certain medical documents. So I guess you would bring your medical documents to the 504 committee and they would make the best determination going forward. Another question about ventilation. They'd like to put more money towards ventilations, not extracurricular activities such as field lights. More of a statement. Sorry. One of the, there was a few questions or statements in the chat. We're just wrapping up the chat that what kind of medical documentation would we need, or what would happen if I went to a 504? How do I really come to school without a mask? And I was just saying, like Dr. Harney said, the 504 committee would meet. They would make a determination from the medical documentation, speaking with a medical doctor here in our school district. And the last question was...
So one thing, it would probably go to our medical directors who it would go to help out with the 504 process.
And it's more of a statement. We'd like to see more ventilation in the school, not focused on extracurricular in noting football lights or lights on the field. We also, when we are past the pandemic and masks are optionals, would the district consider virtual instruction for students who didn't feel comfortable back in school? So that would have to be a conversation that we would have at that time. I don't think prior we did not offer that, so it'd have to be another conversation going forward if we would offer virtual for once the option is removed. There's a few more statements. I'll summarize some of the comments that were made. Parental choice. Are our voices being heard? How are you supporting us? What are you going to do with these comments? That'll be something we can open up to the board, but I just want to say the board has been very clear. Once the regulation's lifted, masks will be optional in Bayport Blue Point. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. The one example I can give you is the one day we allowed no mask when it was legal. So if you're looking at future behavior, I will look at past behavior. And at this time, I'll open it up to trustees. Some of the comments, like I said. I'm sorry, contact tracing, can we remove this with a vote?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would have to do a little bit more research on that. I did hear that Sachem did it. I also did reach out to Suffolk County Department of Health. They continue to recommend that you do contact tracing, but I'm wondering when the mask mandate is lifted, I'm wondering if that will be part of some of the information that we get. So I'd have to do a little more homework on that. I believe they went against it.
No, in Sachem, they passed a resolution to eliminate contact tracing. But the contact tracing has been pretty much watered down from when it was first implemented because the Department of Health, it's supposed to be between the district and the Department of Health. Department of Health got overwhelmed and said that, we can't continue to do the contact tracing like we were doing, and we'll leave it up to the district. But what Dr. Hardy made a good point, and it's been development since the Sachem board meeting with respect to now the governor announcing, practically that she is going to be removing the mask mandate in schools, is that you want to see what the guidance is going to be attached to that. There was a recent guidance that was put out on February 4th regarding isolation and quarantine. It does not address contact tracing at all. So I think the prudent move would be to receive that information. I think they're going to have to make some decisions. An example right now is in terms of a quarantine situation. If you're currently wearing a mask, and you're more than 3 feet away and you come into contact with somebody with COVID, you don't have to quarantine. Well, if you're going to now no longer have a mask on, what is now the quarantine standard going to be? They're going to have to address that. They're going to have to reconcile it with going back to a normalcy. And so that's all going to fall within, I suspect, that there will be written guidance that will have to be generated on contact tracing that we'll need to consider.
I would open it up to trustees to answer that question. Do we want to have an open discussion on contact tracing? I mean, we do have guidance, but I would open it up to you guys if we want to have a further conversation on that.
Mr. Miller, I would say, subject to legal advice, I don't know that that's something that we can vote on.
Thank you, Mr. Borowski. I will go back to what I said earlier about kind of wrapping this up in regards to some of the great comments about parental choice. What are we going to do with these comments? I want to open it up to the board. Going forward is what are some next steps? People not feeling like they're being supported. Open it up to trustees for next steps in regards to supporting community members.
Mr. Miller?
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll allow me a little bit of leeway with this. I took some notes as people were talking. There's definitely some things that resonated with me that were said this evening. First off, I just want to say I understand that you're just advocating for your kids. That has different meanings for different people, and I understand that it's done in different ways, but ultimately that's the end goal that's going on here. And that's not lost on us. One of the other things that was mentioned, I believe it was somebody that mentioned the sports attendance. I can personally identify with that. My daughter is a club swimmer, and which is good for her, but unfortunate for us in these conditions because she swims at a lot of universities, which means I don't get to go. I get to watch her through a YouTube link with a cell phone. Sure. How's that better? Okay. So I just wanted to say that I identify with the item that was raised relating to sports. I'm in that same situation. My daughter's on a club swim team, and unfortunately a lot of the competitions she's in are held at universities, which means I can't go. My wife can't go, none of us can go. It's a live stream event, and I understand how frustrating that can be. One of the great things about watching your kids play sports is actually watching them compete, because you get to see all the hard work they put into practice and actually see that come to fruition in competition. I can 100% identify with that. I can also identify with a topic that I've heard a couple times this evening, which is anxiety and depression. That is something that I struggle with personally. And I would not want to create a situation where that is imparted on children in this district. I would not. It's a difficult thing to deal with, and as somebody said earlier, particularly as it relates to the youngest kids, when it comes to speech delays and things like that. And I think what's important to remember is at the beginning, there wasn't really a playbook for this. We kind of all went into it together and tried to figure it out as we went along. And one of the things we did was, most cautious approach. I think that now there is some offset to that scale. We are seeing some of the negative impacts of a potential universal policy. So one of the things that I would like to personally ask the board if they'd be willing to do is, as Mr. Block said, the DOH public comment is open through February 14th. I think that one of the things that we should take action on is to draft a letter to submit, both through that public comment approach and then also, I would hope, directly to the governor with a copy. Just outlining exactly what is going on here. Everybody's frustrated, which I totally understand. I feel like we're living kind of 2 weeks at a time. And we don't really have a goal yet. It's kind of nebulous, the statements of we're going to reevaluate, we're going to relook. Somebody mentioned earlier this has been going on for, depending on when you start counting, anywhere between 17 and 24 months. At this point, there should be sufficient data, and I mean data, metrics, that we can look at to say, when we reach this point, this is when everything will go back to what I think is my goal and what I think is the board's goal of a pre-pandemic learning environment and everything that's included with that. So no masks, no contact tracing, no social distancing. I think that that would be a good approach to voice that and to ask for what we have to do to get to that point. Because I'm not a long-time resident, I've only been here 5 or 6 years, so I don't even have my permanent resident card yet. But one of the things that always amazes me about this community is its ability to come together for a common goal. Whether that's helping out a neighbor, somebody that's fallen on hard times, somebody that lost someone, somebody that just needs somebody to talk to. And I think that if we are given a goal with finite, concrete numbers, I have no doubt in my mind that this community will reach that. So that's what I would advocate for. I would advocate for drafting a letter, sending it through the Department of Health public comment process, copying the governor, outlining the frustration, and asking for an exit. What do we have to do to get there? I think that's a reasonable ask at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Borowski. Any other trustees' comments? Ms. Serrano?
Mr. Miller, I'd like to speak. Mr. Miller, Adrienne Sarum. I just wanted to thank everyone for being here tonight. I want to thank the people that came forward to share their stories, because that's how we learn from each other, is when we hear about experiences and what you're living through day to day. So I appreciate you taking a risk to be in a public forum, to be online, and to probably be in a newspaper somewhere or on social media with what you've said tonight. I am a person who writes notes. That's how I comprehend and listen at the same time. I have made notes. I have also resonated with things that have been said tonight, and I appreciate you doing that. And I know that with a letter that's been brought up tonight, that we're looking for an end plan, an end game, and I'm totally on board with that, and we'll be advocating for some readjustments with the reopening plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Serrano. Any other trustees?
Mr. Miller?
Ms. Pendola?
I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it. I would also be fully on board for writing a letter that voices our community's opinions and how we can get into this end goal.
Thank you, Ms. Pendola. Mr. Johnson?
I agree 100% with what Mr. Borowski said. I know we kind of need to get to a place where we know where the end game is. I need to know where the off-ramp is at this point. I understand the reasoning behind a lot of this, but I think we need to be part of where we need to get towards the goal.
Have you ever been fined? I'm just wondering.
That was one of the... No.
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, not in my time sitting in this seat, which I'm happy to say.
When you say fine, and for what?
Yeah, you mean for anything? Oh, no. The only thing I can compare it to is, and you probably have seen this over the course of the past 2 years, there were 4 or 5 districts that tried to do that, and then they changed literally the next day or two because the governor's office did call them, and they did get personal calls from the governor's office. So that I do know.
Any other trustee comments? So everyone is on board with writing a letter in regards to a transition plan, looking for metrics, detailing mask, contact tracing, and social distancing. Anybody have any pushback with that? What I can say is we will create a letter. As soon as the letter is completed, we will get it out to the community and we will send it to the governor in the near future. We're gonna put that in the letter. We will put that in the letter. But what I will say is I want to thank you guys so much for coming out tonight. We do. Yes, sir.
So the one thing you haven't, like, for example, you see all the positive cases on the website, so we do post all those. If you remember, I used to send you all those letters, right, every day. And then we moved that to just kind of the website because it was just becoming, I'll be honest with you, too daunting to every day to send it. So we have that. But what we do, for example, is, so for example, if, whether it be a staff member or a student, anybody within the district, if somebody were quarantined, when it's reported, because we still have to report it in 2 places. We still have to report everything to New York State, and we have to report everything to Suffolk County. So we still are reporting things to Suffolk County. With that, so for example, if it said, hey, staff member Tim Harney tested positive today, we do get a list of who was quarantined, like how many people were quarantined. Luckily, this year in general, I'm going to make a general statement, we do very little quarantining because of the way they adjusted some of the guidelines. So that's been better this year. So. Yeah, because the answer is as long as they tell us, yes. I don't know it off the top of my head. I'd have to go through it all to be honest with you. You know. Yeah, when we were doing it a lot, especially early on. If you notice, in the beginning, we very rarely ever quarantine classes, okay? Very rarely. No, I'm just talking in general. So what I'm saying is in the beginning, so for example, we used to always follow in our health staff who does a tremendous job, right? Keeping track of, all right, just want to let you know, student so-and-so tested positive, and then they're trying to keep track of anyone around. So I will always ask the question if someone goes, hey, Tim, this is Dr. Harney, this is the 2nd or 3rd student in the class. Then right off there, we're trying to say, okay, can we kind of figure out where it started from? The hardest part about it all is, as you know this, it could be also coming from the outside in. So that makes it a little bit more difficult as well. But we do watch that.
Okay, I just want to say we
See, for example, I can give you an example. The other day, we had a class at one of the elementary schools where 1 turned up, and we had 3 others turn up. Now, again, I can't say if it happened from in school or if it happened because I knew they were together at some point. So that's where it becomes. So those are just things that we go, because then we say, okay, how is everyone else in that class?
I just want to thank you guys for coming out tonight. It does look like potentially on March 7th, the mask mandate may be removed from the governor. We are not sure. But when this pandemic is over, we're really hopeful that this community can heal, and we will continue to improve. And I hope the relationships in this community continue to stay strong. I know people are frustrated with differing opinions and different beliefs, but it is my hope and our hope up here that once this mask mandate is removed, we will continue to move forward as one community. I know some of the people have sent emails saying we are split, we are divided. I think that is safe to say right now, but we are not split and divided on what means most, and this is students here in Bayport Blue Point, or the character of this community. We are not split on that. We are split on a mask mandate that the governor has imposed right now. So please don't forget, Bayport Blue Point is strong. We will continue to improve. We will continue to stay together. Do not let this break us up. Thank you guys so much for your time tonight. We appreciate it. We're a little over time, but I really thank you guys for having the opportunity. We will be back on Tuesday night. Tuesday night, we're going to have 2 budget presentations. We will also have a transportation study, and we will also have a middle school sports presentation. And we're recognizing students, so please, I want to put it out there now so no one is offended. We are going to skip the community participation in the beginning of the meeting and hold it to the end. Not because we're trying to limit voices. That's why we wanted to have this meeting tonight. We will not want to limit voices. We're putting it at the end because we have 4 presentations. So, what? We could vote. We're waiting on the new guidance, and we are going to, we promise we will put that in our letter, Ms. McCormick. We are going to put this in our letter. We will put this in our letter. At this time, we're not voting. We're not voting at this time. Mr. McCormick, we're going to put it in our letter, and we're going to move on.
Yeah. Let me put it in context. Is the school district mandated by law to do contact tracing? The answer is no. Is it, does the school district still have the discretion to be able to do contact tracing? Has Dr. Harney said the Suffolk County Department of Health has recommended that the district still engage in contact tracing? I think that's something that the board and Dr. Harney and the administration are going to discuss as to what is the best practice going forward. There will probably be some future guidance coming imminently, I suspect, regarding contact tracing. But I do know, and again, Dr. Harney can address it, I think he has already a little bit, that the contact tracing that was being done when this whole pandemic started is much different than the contact tracing that is being done now. Not as many students are being quarantined. Again, it's been all put into the hands of the school district, and what's supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be what the local county Department of Health. But I think that's something that the board will certainly have discussion about going forward. And again, the contact tracing may be eliminated altogether in terms of guidance. So we'll see what happens.
All right, guys, thank you so much for your time. We truly appreciate it. Have a good night.
Adjourn.